Welcome to Focus SoCal. I'm Tanya McRae. California is returning to near normal life as most coronavirus-related restrictions were lifted earlier this month. I had the opportunity to discuss the state's reopening with Governor Gavin Newsom in an exclusive interview 15 months after he issued the nation's first statewide shutdown. Since last spring, more than 3.77 million Californians tested positive for COVID-19, and nearly 63,000 people lost their lives. Parts of Southern California were disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, including South Los Angeles. Governor Newsom visited Martin Luther King Jr. Community Hospital, which was at the center of last winter's COVID-19 surge, to thank healthcare workers for their dedication throughout the pandemic.
You persevered. You didn't give up. And so I'm here with just deep respect and admiration to each and every one of you. Thank you for being leaders. Thank you for saving lives.
The governor toured the hospital with elected officials, including LA City Councilman Mark Ridley Thomas, LA County Supervisor Holly Mitchell, State Senator Stephen Bradford, and Assemblyman Mike Gibson. But before all of that, he sat down with me for a candid interview to talk about reopening California and all that lies ahead. Governor Newsom, this is a big month for California. After a year of the COVID-19 pandemic, businesses are now able to operate at full capacity. Most people who are vaccinated are going to be able to go out and go where they want without wearing their masks. As we move forward, what do you think the next phase of getting through the COVID-19 pandemic will be like?
It was interesting, just before I got here, someone reminded me of a conversation I had then with President Trump, 4:30 in the morning in early March of last year, that sort of marked an indelible moment as I reflected on it, where the country had less than 500 cases, entire country. And President Trump was trying to convince me, unsuccessfully, not to bring in the Grand Princess cruise line into the San Francisco Bay, into the Oakland port, because it would increase potentially the total number of COVID cases. Now, he was a bit tongue-in-cheek in the conversation, but it was a 4:30 in the morning conversation, one of those you don't forget. We eventually did bring the cruise ship in, but none of us, I was reflecting back on that, none of us could have imagined what the next year would be like. Again, 500 cases, and he subsequently was talking about this thing going away in the summer when it got warmer. And you just think about the tens of thousands of lives that were lost here in this state. The hundreds of lives that were lost in the last couple of weeks here in our state, the hundreds of thousands, millions around the rest of the world. It's been a hell of a year. Stress, anxiety, fear, the loneliness many people have felt over the course of last year. So look, we're at this point, but it wasn't without a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. And so I'm mindful of that. It's sobering, but it's also a moment to celebrate the tenacity, the grit, the resiliency of 40 million Californians. First stay-at-home order in America really led to change the conversation across the country. I think it saved a lot of lives, and because we took a health-centric approach, our economy is also coming roaring back as a consequence.
What do you see the next 3 months looking like?
Obviously, there's so much that we can't predict about the future, particularly with these mutations and variants. And remember, we're not just looking at a few variants. We're looking at many different variants, many different mutations, including our own West Coast variants. In fact, the dominant variant, the dominant mutation in California are two West Coast variants. You've got New York variants. Obviously, we got the W mutation, which is the Delta variant out of India, but the B117, which was the UK variant, is likely to be even more dominant here in California in the next few months. Look, with all that said, with the success of our vaccination rates, the fact that we got a month early on reaching President Biden's goal of 70+% of adults, there are parts of the state that have less than 30% of the counties vaccinated. Up in Lassen County, they're literally less than 30%. So what we are likely to be doing, and I anticipate this will happen, is as we move out of the summer into the fall and potentially see some outbreaks, we're going to have what we call halo vaccination strategies, ring vaccination strategies, literally strike teams that come in and try to mitigate spread, more contact tracers, more of the traditional things that we started with the pandemic are going to be even more meaningful and important to finally extinguish this pandemic with the addition now in our arsenal toolkit of the vaccinations themselves.
What industries and sectors of the economy do you believe will rebound the fastest, and which will need more time and assistance?
Well, we talk about California's economy coming roaring back. Let me give you some proof points of that. In February, 41% of America's jobs came out of the state of California. 41% of America's jobs. Just last month, the April numbers, the latest numbers that came out, 38% of America's jobs. Specifically, disproportionate number of those jobs, particularly the February numbers, came in the hospitality and entertainment industries, and that's not surprising. So when we look at the economic recovery, we have to look at those industries that were disproportionately impacted, and that's hospitality, restaurants, and entertainment. And so we're seeing those numbers change dramatically, and while we still will lag on international tourism, we're really hoping to address domestic tourism, not just domestic in the United States, but also staycations and encouraging people to rediscover their own state or discover their own state as it may be. Because there's people travel all over the globe to come to the state of California. Some people live 10 miles off the coast and have never been to a beach. And so we want to remind people of those opportunities as we get this economy moving again and help support that domestic growth and that domestic engagement and spending.
I'm sure one of the things that you also love about California, as I do, is certainly living in Los Angeles area, you can go 2 hours in any given direction and go from the city to the mountains, to the ocean, to the desert, to the forest. There's so many different environments here. It is like going to other countries.
There's nothing, it's simply put, it's not just being braggadocious, but as a fifth generation Californian, it's a little bit of point of pride. Eat your heart out. There's every other jurisdiction on planet Earth. We have the oldest living things in the history of the world. Our old sequoia, some of the oldest trees down here in Southern California. High deserts, low deserts. The hottest recorded temperature on planet Earth in decades was recorded here in the state of California last year in Death Valley. You've got the Sierra Nevadas. We may have issues with drought and snowfall, but you have some of the most majestic ranges anywhere in the world, the most majestic beaches and coastlines. I was just out there. We were fixing up a freeway near Big Sur. And I'm sitting there going, why am I not in Big Sur every weekend? Truly jaw-droppingly spectacular. And I'm not even talking about the entertainment capital of the world, the agricultural capital of the world, and the innovation capital of the world. It's a really special place. The balance sheet in California is unlike any other on planet Earth.
You were the first governor in the country to order a shutdown, and it was an unprecedented decision. But I think many people say that people realize how serious the coronavirus really was when you did that, and other states followed in California's lead. What was the moment last spring when you said, this is what we have to do?
No, that was hard. The consequences, this is the fifth largest economy on planet Earth. This is not a small isolated state. Those consequences may not be felt outside the state. The consequences are going to be felt arguably around the rest of the world as it relates to the state being number one in two-way trade. Obviously, the issue of the ports, Long Beach and LA, notably from an international trading perspective. To do a state shutdown, state 40 million strong, size of 21 states in America combined, was going to be consequential. So wasn't an easy process getting to that point, but it was the recognition of how serious this was. And again, it's what we didn't know at the time, right? We didn't know what we didn't know. And the only thing we didn't have the vaccines in our toolkit. There was still a lot of issue and consternation around a lack of masking for ICU docs and nurses. We didn't even have masking, so we couldn't do a mask mandate when we couldn't even find masks for our heroes and frontline employees. And so you had so little in terms of the way of tools at the time. And so we just felt it was appropriate. And look, it saved lives. And I'm not saying that, look, obviously I'm subjective. And I've been very self-critical and reflective on what went right, what went wrong, and when the dust fully settles, we'll have a better chance to really adjudicate that with more objectivity and hindsight. Because in hindsight, at the end of the day, we're all geniuses, and coulda, shoulda, woulda. And so I love all the people on the sideline say, well, this and that. But anyway, nonetheless, it was consequential. But let's put a couple things in perspective that aren't getting as much attention. Florida and Texas have gotten a lot of attention for their approach to this COVID crisis. But the fact remains, California has outperformed Texas notably in terms of health outcome, and state like Florida. But not just in terms of health, also in terms of the economy. California contracted at a much lower rate than Florida and Texas, Indiana, the United States as a whole, because of the health focus, because of the health centricity to our approach. It had a better economic benefit, not just a better health benefit. And I think that's something that needs to be brought into the mainstream of conversation, that the framework, and we said this, Fauci said this, that the quickest way to get back to normal, to get to this point, June 15th, where we are today, was to put this pandemic behind us, to mitigate the spread and transmission of this disease.
You were a trailblazer in making that decision.
Hey, it's a hell of a thing, being in any position of formal authority. We all can exercise our moral authority every single day. All of us have leadership roles and responsibilities. But people in positions of formal authority during a pandemic, those are tough positions to be in. And at the end of the day, the buck does stop with you. And people are right to be critical and criticize, but you get it coming and going. Now, the left and right, I mean, across the ideological spectrum, and the consequences are profound. I mean, look, I'm a small business owner. I started right out of college, opened a small business, one part-time employee, Pat Kelly. We grew that business to 21 little businesses up and down the state, close to 1,000 employees at peak. I live and breathe restaurant business, the hospitality business. So when people are saying, well, you don't understand, I live and breathe it. I intimately understand what the stay-at-home order meant for that mom and pop that put everything on the line, that has a second mortgage or got a line of credit or borrowed money from friends or family, and they're shut down. And so I have deep respect and empathy, deep respect and empathy. It wasn't dollars and cents, it's lives and dreams. And so we're doing everything in our power now that we're running an $80 billion budget surplus, $80 billion, biggest surplus in American history, that we're able to do a tax rebate to 2/3 of Californians. We're able to provide $4 billion of direct grants to small businesses. We're going to pay 100% of your back rent to April of last year. 100% of your rent will pay off if you've been directly impacted by COVID, going back to April of last year, and we'll pay it going forward to September 30th of this year. We'll do the same thing for utilities and water, because we're mindful that people are still struggling, and we're mindful, despite the economic turnaround and the fact that we're leading the nation in job creation, there's still a lot of folks that are being left behind, and we have a responsibility to each and every one of them.
Still ahead, Governor Gavin Newsom thanks healthcare workers and essential workers for their sacrifice and shares his thoughts on the future of California. We'll be right back. You're watching In Focus SoCal.